You found your way to Whispers of Crimes, a quiet corner where the shadows of the past are gently told. Here, we speak of real crimes and mysteries, not to shock or scare, but to wonder, to reflect, and maybe to help you fall asleep. So close your eyes, let your thoughts slow down, and come with me into tonight's case. She was young, brilliant, and on the verge of becoming one of the Philippines' most celebrated artists. But one September morning in 2021, Bree Jonson was found lifeless in a La Union resort, bruises on her neck, cocaine in the room, and a billionaire's son by her side. He walked free. She never came home. Was it suicide or something more sinister? In a country where power can silence truth, Bree's case became a battle cry for justice, one that's far from over. This is the story of Bree Jonson, and the questions no one wants to answer. Chapter 1. The artist who saw the world differently before the headlines and heartbreak. There was Bree Jonson, the artist. Born Brina Patricia Jonson in the Philippines, Bree wasn't raised in a life of extravagance or power. What set her apart wasn't wealth or name, it was vision. She studied at Ateneo de Manila University and found herself drawn to the visual arts. In a country with a booming but often underappreciated contemporary art scene, Bree found her voice. And her voice was loud, raw, emotional. Her canvases often featured animal symbols of instinct, fragility, and the chaos of nature. Some interpreted her work as commentary on gender, others on isolation or environmental decay. Whatever the reading, one thing was always true: Bree painted with soul. She was invited to exhibits in Manila, Singapore, and beyond. She was respected, even revered, among peers in the tight-knit Filipino art community. Bree wasn't just an emerging artist, she was a force, someone with decades of brilliance ahead. But in September 2021, the headlines told a different story. Bree Jonson was dead, found lifeless in a resort bathroom in La Union. And with that, the art world lost not just a talent, but a woman whose voice had only just begun to shake the walls. Chapter 2. A quiet town. A violent night, La Union is known for its waves, its sunsets, and its serenity. San Juan, one of its coastal towns, is popular among surfers and weekenders. It was here that Bree and Julian Ongpin checked into a modest resort on the night of September 17, 2021. Julian Ongpin, an unfamiliar name to many until that week, was the 29-year-old son of billionaire Roberto Ongpin, a former government minister turned tycoon. Bree and Julian had been seeing each other, though the exact nature of their relationship remains ambiguous. Friends described it as complicated. Bree's family, especially her mother Sally, seemed uneasy about it. At around 4 a.m., voices were heard shouting in room 11 of the resort. Witnesses, including resort staff, reported hearing a loud argument. Minutes later, the noise stopped. Not long after, Julian Ongpin was seen frantically seeking help. Bree was found unconscious inside the bathroom. When medics arrived, they confirmed what many feared: Bree Jonson was already dead. It didn't make sense. Why would a vibrant, passionate artist on the brink of another breakthrough suddenly choose to end her life? Was it suicide, as Julian would later claim? Or was something darker at play? Chapter 3. Drugs, Power, and a System Under Scrutiny. The investigation began immediately, or at least, it should have. When police inspected the hotel room, they found over 12 grams of cocaine. That's no small amount. In the Philippines, drug possession of this scale typically leads to automatic detention. Under the country's harsh drug laws, even a few grams can mean life imprisonment. Both Bree and Julian tested positive for drug use. But here's where things began to shift from standard procedure to something more concerning. Despite the drugs, despite being the only other person in the room, Julian Ongpin was not detained. He was released. Why? That became the question on everyone's mind. Many pointed to Julian's father, an influential figure with deep political and corporate connections. Social media erupted. Journalists started digging. How could a man in possession of illegal drugs, tied to the suspicious death of a woman, walk free? In a country where thousands had been jailed or even killed for lesser drug-related offenses, the contrast was blinding. It didn't feel like justice, it felt like privilege. Chapter 4. A Mother's Grief, a Nation's Rage. If the system had gone silent, Sally Johnson made sure the world didn't forget. Bree's mother, a school administrator and a woman with no wealth or power, suddenly became a public figure. But not by choice. With cameras in her face and microphones shoved in her direction, she did what any mother would do: fight. In every interview, every press conference, she demanded the truth. She rejected the narrative that Bree had taken her own life. She spoke of bruises. She spoke of pain. She spoke of cover-ups. Sally requested a second autopsy done independently, and the results challenged the initial findings. There were marks around Bree's neck, injuries inconsistent with suicide. Medical professionals suggested that the possibility of strangulation could not be ruled out. But despite these developments, progress was slow. Charges weren't filed. Investigators dragged their feet. And Sally Johnson's voice clear, grief-stricken, an angry cut through the noise of bureaucracy. She wasn't just fighting for her daughter. She was fighting against a culture of impunity, against a justice system that often bends for the powerful, and against a society that too quickly moves on. Chapter 5. Justice delayed and denied. In the months that followed, the Department of Justice reviewed the case. For a while, it seemed the tide might turn. The public was watching. Advocacy groups were demanding transparency. International media began to take interest. Surely, the government couldn't ignore all that pressure. But what came next was disheartening. Julian Ongpin was charged, but only for drug possession. The homicide angle? Dropped. The death of Bree Jonson was ruled officially as suicide, with no criminal liability attached to Julian. Just drugs. Just a fine. Maybe probation. The country watched in disbelief. It was hard not to compare Bree's case with countless others. Ordinary people, mostly poor, languishing in jails for years over mere grams of marijuana. Yet here was a man, from one of the richest families in the nation, walking free after a woman was found dead in his presence, after drugs were found in his hotel room. Justice, many said, wasn't just delayed. It had been denied entirely. Chapter 6. The art left behind. In the middle of legal battles and media noise, Bree's art became her most powerful legacy. Her paintings were now more than just visual experiences. They were emotional time capsules. Many featured animals trapped in unnatural positions, staring blankly into space. Others were chaotic, filled with tangled limbs, lost eyes, haunting landscapes. Audiences began to see her work differently after her death. Was it a cry for help, a reflection of inner turmoil, or simply the product of an artist deeply attuned to life's darker emotions? Exhibitions were held in her honor. Friends in the art community spoke of her with reverence. Bree had something the rest of us were still chasing, one fellow artist said. She wasn't just painting, she was translating something cosmic. Through her canvases, Bree still speaks, still questions, still provokes. But there's a voidous sense that her story ended before it was meant to. Not in a blaze of glory, but in the sterile light of a resort bathroom under suspicious circumstances. Chapter 7. The silence that speaks loudest. Years have passed since Bree's death, but no one has been held accountable. Julian Ongpin has largely faded from headlines. Legal proceedings stalled. Life went on for some, but for Bree's family, for her mother, And for those who believed in justice, the silence is deafening. Bree Jonson's disappearance wasn't just physical, it was systemic. Her case highlights the chasm between the powerful and the powerless, between those who are protected by their last name and those who are remembered only as hashtags. Her story is a mirror. It reflects the reality of modern justice in the Philippines and beyond, where truth can be slippery and justice is not always blind. Still, there's hope, because stories like Bree's refuse to die, because a mother's love can echo louder than any courtroom ruling, and because somewhere someone is still looking at one of Bree's paintings and remembering her not as a victim, but as a voice, an artist, a fighter. And maybe that voice, yours, mine, ours, can keep asking the question no one wants to answer. What really happened to Bree Jonson? That's all for tonight's story. Another thread in the web of true crime, quietly unraveling as the night goes on. If you're still with me, thanks for listening. And if sleep has already taken you, may your dreams be peaceful and your mind at ease. I'll be here next time by the fire with another story waiting to be told. Good night, and don't forget to lock your doors.